Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. Happy to be with you. Boy, pipelines are a lot in the headlines lately, not least because the Dakota Access Pipeline somehow is still a thing. Like, we built this thing years ago. It's been operating for years. It's been moving hundreds of thousands of barrels of North Dakota oil for years, but somehow we're still having a legal debate about whether or not it should be built. So go figure. Another pipeline that's been in the headlines a lot is the Summit Carbon... Oh gosh, the Carbon Express pipeline from Summit Carbon Solutions. I had a little brain lapse there for a moment. It's essentially it's a pipeline that's going to bring carbon from ethanol plants across the upper Midwest, bring it to North Dakota and bury it down in our geology, which here in North Dakota is very salubrious to storing carbon. It's a good thing. It's not only a good industry for our state in and of itself, but it's something that I would argue, and I think my guest, State Representative Mike Brandenburg, would agree, is important for our state's industries. Now, the Summit Carbon Pipeline is primarily would serve the ag sector, the ethanol sector, and thus the ag sector. But carbon capture, carbon storage is an issue also for the energy industry in our state. So this is a big deal. But there's been a lot of consternation about building it. Now, my guest recently wrote, along with his legislative colleague, Senator Terry Wanzek, they wrote a letter to the editor urging the North Dakota Public Service Commission, which has ruled against a permit for the Summit Carbon Express just recently, although Summit Carbon Express is coming back and trying again. They wrote in favor of it. They want to see this approved. I'm going to quote part of what they wrote. They said, "The future is here, and it demands that we incorporate innovative solutions like carbon capture and storage to ensure the continued prosperity of our leading industries." Representative Brandenburg, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Rob, thank you for having me on. And it's time that we start talking about the positive things about this pipeline. I've got 100 miles of pipeline in my district, in Sargent County and Dickey County and McIntosh County and part of Logan County. So I've had contact with a lot of landowners and a lot of discussion and been involved with this ever since it started. And and one thing Senator Wanzek and myself were talking about in the last months, we've noticed that there's been a change in the corn market and the ethanol market and what's going on and what's happening and why, it's real easy to stand aside and just let this thing happen. And well, when the Public Service Commission did what they did, we felt it was time for us to say, it's, to quit sitting on our hands and say something, because when you take a year ago at this time, corn was $2 higher. And so it's starting to hurt the profitability of the farms and the profitability of the state. North Dakota raises about 400 million bushels of corn. It's very possible this year it might be 500 million because there's a lot of corn seeded. And of that, the ethanol plants use 200 million bushels of that corn, and they produce right around 400 million bushels of ethanol in the state. And so it's a big deal when you start talking. Actually, it's about 500 million bushels of ethanol in North Dakota. So when we start looking at what's happening in agriculture and what this, whether you like it or not, and, we can say, well, we don't want it, we don't want to do this, but Rob and the people that I'm talking to, you got to think about this. Agriculture is 1% of the population. And so for every one of us, there's 99 others that are standing out there thinking a lot different than we are. And in Washington, they put the money into carbon capture, whether you like it or not. And I know I've heard other plans out there that this would do this better and we could do it better this way. And I won't argue that. But the money's been put into carbon capture and to the pipeline. And if we're going to meet our standards that we need to meet with, the clear fuel standards in Canada and lower carbon intensity that is required by other countries. Right now, Brazil's taking our market away, and every time you can listen to every egg farmer or egg producer or marketer or elevator or any of the egg organizations, they listen to the markets as I do every day. Reports come out. We just had a report come out the other day, and why was the reason the market went down? Well, losing exports. Now, I know I'm talking about corn and ethanol, but when these buyers go out and buy their grain, they buy a purchase, they'll buy corn, they'll buy soybeans, and they'll buy wheat, and they'll buy other commodities at the same time. They tie them all together. And so Brazil is doing carbon capture, and we're saying no. And Canada, on July 1st of this year, put into standard their Canadian clear fuel standards on July 1st of 23. We're not meeting the standards. We need to get or show an effort that we're going to start having carbon capture and start promoting this because, I think back in Senator Wanzikmi talked about this because, when we stepped out with this, we know we're going to have some naysayers taking shots at it. They're already taking shots at it. But, I stand up for agriculture all the time. So does Terry. And we got, we went backwards $2 in our corn. That takes a farm that's working on profitability with these higher expenses. And because we've lost a market not only for corn, of ethanol, and it hurts. It's beginning to hurt. It's time to start talking.
I want to summarize some of this because as you said, most of the people listening to this are probably not farmers. So we have to understand how these market works and how the world looks like to farmers who are growing corn and trying to sell it for a profit. So essentially what your argument is, the world, whether we like it or not, the world is wants to now include in the market evaluation of crops the impact of carbon emissions. That's just a reality, and it's happening. Corn is a global market, so it's not just in the United States. This is happening in a lot of places that buy our corn that we don't have any control over their laws. We don't have any control over what they do. They can evaluate our product any way they want. So that's the world that we're living in. And so your argument is we need carbon capture. We need projects like Summit Carbon Solutions so that American agriculture can remain competitive with the rest of the world. Is that right?
That's absolutely right, Rob. You're saying it just right. And until it starts affecting you in the pocketbook, people are pretty complacent. And now it's getting to the point where it's starting to affect the markets where we're seeing we're getting down to $4 corn. I mean, we were at a year and a half ago, I sold corn for $7.78. And ethanol is a big part of it because that's what, we go back 20 years ago and had no ethanol plants in North Dakota, or very few, and even in South Dakota and down south. We were dealing with $2.50 to $3 corn. The ethanol plants have come into play, and now we're dealing with $5 to $7 corn. And now we're sitting at right about $4.20 for cash corn. Well, why? Well, because Canada just enacted their clean fuel standards July 1st. Brazil has taken away the market of the world because they're doing it, and we're losing market share. And we're not even having a bumper crop. I mean, we've got some drought issues out there where the prices should be higher, but because of this carbon capture and we're not meeting those standards, we're losing our market share of exports.
So let's talk about the opposition a little bit, because I think that somebody who is not a farmer and not involved, they're just a member of the public looking on, they're reading headlines and they're getting the impression that there's this uprising of farmers who are just adamantly against this. But you're arguing that this is the pro-farmer position. This is the pro-agriculture position, that we need to build this so that we can be competitive. So why do you think there's all this upset among farmers and landowners about this pipeline?
Well, let's talk about that, Rob, because I was a bit involved with it. A year ago, and actually the Summit Carbon Pipeline, when they started going in the beginning, they had a land crew out there that I felt did a poor job. And they went out there and threatened eminent domain, and they were telling you got to sign here. And I got upset, and I talked to the people working on it, and they made changes. They fired them all. They fired, and so did other legislators, and so did other leaders. It wasn't just me. We had a meeting with them and said, "You guys got a bunch of crooks out here," and then they hired, Charlie Adams and Dave Nearing and Jeff Scarry, and I don't know the others that were working, but those three I worked with, and they went out there and they started treating the landowners with respect. And I always ask myself, what would it take for me to sign if it went through my land? It doesn't go through my land, but I have a lot of my friends that it goes to their land, and they talk to me, and they felt comfortable talking to these people. And they started paying them a fair price, that they felt that, hey, they could live with this price. There was a group down in Dickey County that had a legal firm hired to represent them, and they came up with a good solution. And is everybody completely happy? Probably not. Could they accept it and live with it? That's probably where it's at. But did they get a fair price for what they felt they did? And that's my concern, is that what really upsets me is when people come out here and think that farmers are a bunch of stoops, because we're not. And then they cherry pick some of it. At this point now, I'm supporting them. Here it was a year and a half ago, chewing them out, telling them it's terrible what they're doing. And now I'm standing here defending the project, and not only what they're doing, but what it'll do for agriculture. And so we got 80% of the landowners signed up. There's 20% that are not. And there's probably 10% that'll never sign. And I'm not in favor of eminent domain. I make that clear. You're going to have to go north. You're going to have to go west. You may have to move it some. You go around them. Stay away from them. I mean, there's just some people that don't want it, and that's the reality of life. But these guys are out there treating the landowners with respect, trying to accommodate them. If there's drain tile on their land, they're putting it down 6 feet, and their minimum of 4 feet. Compensation for the land is fair, and I feel a pretty good amount. That's a private contract between that landowner and the company, what they're getting, and I think it's a good number. And for some, maybe they'll never be enough, and for others, they feel, okay, I can live with it.
The way these pipelines work, the first 10% that you sign up is the easiest 10%, right? They for whatever reason, they were easy to negotiate with. And it's the point I'm making is that when you're down and you have just 20% left, those are probably the 20% who are, I don't know, the most stubborn, or you could just say maybe they have the most complex situations depending on how they're using the land or what the land looks like. So I think that's kind of the misleading thing is you've got this idea, well, there's all these people. Well, okay, but as you point out, the 80% of the people along the route have already signed. The 20% that are left, those are the tough ones. Those are the tough situations where, the route is in a difficult spot, or, there could be a lot of factors for why.
Right.
But, I think that could create a misleading perception where we're at.
And I think, and Rob, I think some of the press is doing that. I'm just going to, without naming names, I think they're not telling the whole truth. And you need to start telling the truth, especially when you represent a big farm organization and you're not telling the whole story.
Well, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the politics of this, because it sometimes it kind of seems like some of this is maybe tied up in personalities, like especially here in North Dakota. We have a lot of things going on politically. Governor Burgum's been an outspoken proponent of the pipeline, and a lot of the people who have sort of taken a position, I have perceived them as almost taking a position just because Governor Burgum wants this, they're going to fight it. Do you perceive that as well? And I think that's really unfortunate. A good idea should be a good idea. I try for myself. I'll work with anybody who agrees with me, right, on a given issue. We may fight on 99% of other issues, but if there's a 1% issue that we could find common ground on, why on earth would I not want to work with that people? But I'm afraid there are people out there that for political reasons, for personality reasons, are just against this because they're against it. Do you perceive that as well?
Well, yeah, Rob, absolutely. And one thing I've learned in life is that, the truth always wins. It takes time for the truth to come out, but the truth will win in the end. And here's the thing is that it's not just about agriculture. It's also about energy. When you look at, coal and the issues that they have with, they got to take care of the CO2 emissions too. So it's a partnership between fossil fuels and ethanol working together to try to find a solution for all this. And that's the part where you got people in coal country that are even fighting it, and they need it the most.
It's not just because the Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline, while a very important piece of infrastructure, is not the be-all or end-all of what carbon capture, I think, is going to mean to this country. But it's kind of, and I don't even want to say it's the first project through the door. We have a couple of pipelines, carbon pipelines, certainly smaller in scope, that have been operating in North Dakota for a long time. We already have carbon capture projects that are up and operating. Red Trail Energy, an ethanol plant in the state, they're already doing it. I mean, they're already capturing it. They're doing it on site, but they're already capturing it and storing it. And I mean, this is already happening. So it's not like this is some new technology, but I think for the public's perception, Summit Carbon Solutions is the first one through the door. And I'm really worried the outcome of this project, what it hinges on, not, I think the future of our two most important industries, agriculture and energy, hinge on it, because we're going to have to figure out how to address the carbon. That's just a reality. I worry that our reputation as, North Dakota being a place where things can get done and being a pro-business state, I feel like that's on the line. And frankly, I think for our country, if we zoom out a little bit and look at the scope of this, because this pipeline's certainly not just in North Dakota, and there's certainly other projects like it that are also under fire, I worry about our reputation as America being a place where business can be done. And in that context, I'm not just thinking about, carbon pipelines. I'm thinking about Dakota Access Pipeline, where we're still litigating the stupid thing. I worry about all these things. Like, are we going to lose that reputation, or are we going to be this place where doing anything just becomes this political and bureaucratic nightmare?
Yeah. No, Rob, you're right on. And the thing too is that, we're at a point now where, we worked for 20 years to get the ethanol plants up and going and take the corn price from $2.50 to $3 to up to $5. We doubled the price of corn. That's what we've done. Look what it's done for agriculture in North Dakota. And look what, when farmers have money, they buy a new pickup, they buy a new car, they go to town and they do business and buy clothes and buy groceries and buy, furniture and everything else that, people, that they sell. And so if we're going the history will tell, if we're going to want to go back to $3 corn, and then, the bankers, they're sitting there right now looking at, farmers, and we're sitting dealing with our banker for an operating loan next year, and all of a sudden we're sitting with $3 corn instead of $6 corn. How that's going to cash flow? That ain't going to work.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because this is something I didn't realize, because I'm not a farmer. I didn't realize that this you feel like the Summit Carbon Solutions is already having an impact on corn prices in North Dakota. Like, it's already showing up that we're at a disadvantage?
Yep, absolutely, because Canada is our biggest importer of ethanol, and they just enacted their standards here in July 1st. And so they're looking other places because we're not getting there. We got to lower our carbon score. Right now we're at 75, and we need to get down to a 50. And also, if we want to get into the aviation fuel market, we got to do the same thing. They just won't accept it. They won't even buy it. So if the ethanol plants can't sell their ethanol to the people that want to buy it, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to get mothballed? Are we, if it won't work, it won't work. And that's where it's going. And I got to point out again, there's 99 of those that think that way and one of us. I mean, we're 1% of the people that are making the decisions in Washington. And that's the part that Do I like that? No, but it's reality. And so here we are dealing with something that we don't like, but we've got to sort through this and figure out what's the right thing to do, so that we can maintain those prices and not lose that market, and watch something that we worked so hard to get slip away.
Mike, you've been in the compromise business, working in the legislature for a long time, and you I don't think you have a successful career in someplace like the legislature if you don't know how to make a deal, where you get some of what you want, but not all of what you want, and you get some of what you want by giving the other side some of what they want. So, I feel like we've already done like some of the things that need to happen to get the Summit pipeline over the finish line and to change the narrative. Some of it's already happened. For instance, I think Summit absolutely has some culpability, and they made a bad hire early on where they had some land people that went out there and fostered just an absolutely acrimonious relationship with landowners. That's a terrible mistake. You need the landowners to be on your side. So, Summit's to blame for that. But they fixed that. So, they need the, to their credit. But they need this permit from the Public Service Commission. And I do think that they probably need to shift public opinion somewhat in their direction. How do they do that in your mind? Like what needs to happen next?
Well, I'll tell you what I think, and I've already told some of the groups this already, and so it's Senator Wanzig. Here we are stepping out in front of the railroad, the train, and saying, "Hey, we got to make a change here. We got to have a changed attitude." We've already talked to the ethanol people and the corn people and the egg communities. It's time for them to step up to the plate and start telling the truth, because it's real easy because there's controversy out there with taking a position about what's happening, and now that the prices have went down, everybody's going, "Hey, what's happening? Here's what's happening." Well, we talked about this during the session, that how important this was to work with it, and to be honest, I was hoping things would work out where the Public Service Commission would have working sessions, and they probably do need to move that line further north of Bismarck. It's maybe too close to town. Make those decisions and have working sessions and work through that, and work with those other farmers that don't want it. Find a route around them. If that's what the working sessions are for, just don't say no and go back to the chalkboard and start over. That doesn't solve anything. All that does is give them more fuel for the fire to try to kill it. You mentioned that there's some in the media, and the president of the North Dakota Farm Bureau is also a talk radio host who broadcasts a show out of Bismarck. And I feel like in your mind, I feel like a lot of what's going on here, there's a lot of misinformation flying around, and a lot of people say that anytime somebody's making an argument they don't want to hear. So I understand that the term misinformation gets overused as well, but in your mind, what are the myths that people don't understand about this project? Like what are some of the things that people have bought into that just aren't true? Well, they're not taking your land away. Nobody is taking your land away, and they're not taking it away without compensating you for being able to put the pipeline through your land. That's not true. It's like I've heard people say that they're stealing my land. Well, don't sign it then and go around somewhere else. But to go out and a lot of it's just plain bold-faced lies about that these people are as bad as they are. Because I haven't heard that, over in my district, I've heard some of them, they don't like it being close to their homes. They want that moved away, and they should be moved away from if they're too close to their home.
Sure, that's understandable.
That I agree with. Very valid concern. And so they're trying to work through that. And they're telling me that they're trying to get to that point because you want it to be safe too. Nobody wants an accident out there. But to say that they're going to steal your land is absolutely untrue. That's not true. And I've heard that said. And they're compensating them very well for putting a pipeline in too. the money wise is very good. And for some people, it's not enough money. It doesn't matter. They just don't want it. Well, then you got to find a way to go north and west, and get out to the formation out in the western part of the state.
Do you, it seems like a lot of this stuff, I kind of was talking about how carbon capture isn't maybe as new as we think it is, because, we've had the pipelines, we've had some of the projects already here. But a lot of this process of just, taking all the carbon capture and everything out of it, the process of burying pipe on the line in the land, or burying transmission, or whatever you want to say, that's not new to us. And it's surprising to me that in a lot of ways we're kind of carrying on like it's new. Like, we have this process for coming to landowners and saying, I want to bury a pipe, whether it's a natural gas pipe or an oil pipe or what have you. Like, we've done this before. We have all sorts of laws about it. We have regulatory agencies that handle this as a matter of routine. We have, all sorts of jurisprudence from the courts about it. Why? To me, that's what, when I asked you the question about it being political, that's what makes it, to me, my mind, makes it political, that because there's kind of nothing new under the sun here. The negotiation between someone who wants to build a pipe and somebody who owns the land is not a new thing.
Yeah. And Rob, right now, since 1998, there's a 200-mile pipeline from the gasification plant going to Weyburn, Saskatchewan. It's been operating since 1998. 40 years operation. Hasn't been a problem. And that's a CO2 pipeline. It's been going on for 40 years already. So I don't know where it's coming from. I'm trying to figure that out. And you're asking questions that I don't know where they're substantiating their comments, because the history has already proven in the state that this is pipeline that's going to Weyburn and has been there and it's working, and they haven't had a problem.
Well,
so
I feel like the facts of this are just indisputable. We know how to build pipelines in this country. We know how to build them safely. We know how to build carbon pipelines in this country. As you just mentioned, we've had one that's been operating for 40 years without incident. And also we know that if we don't get on the train for capturing carbon and lowering the score for our, the whatever you want to call it, the climate change score, whatever, for our crops, countries like Brazil are going to eat our lunch. We're going to be behind. And I don't understand how anybody in North Dakota or anywhere else for that matter can be in support of an outcome that puts American farmers behind the 8 ball. I don't understand it.
Well, we've already went down $2 in price in corn. How far are we going to let it go?
Yeah, good question. Representative Brandenburg, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.